Bienvenido, doctor Sugata Mitra, es un gusto tenerlo aquí con nosotros. Usted demuestra que los chicos, los niños, pueden organizarse, autoorganizarse para aprender por sí mismos. Ya han pasado unos cuantos años. ¿Qué cree usted que finalmente prevalezca? ¿Será el aprendizaje, como usted lo demuestra en esa experiencia, o la educación?
Well, the first thing to point out is that while these experiments were going on for the last 15 years actually, the technological environment was also changing. So there are two variables, one of the experiments, the other is the environment itself. The hole-in-the-wall experiment of the 1999-2000 showed that children can operate computers by themselves, which is obvious now. The subsequent experiments with self-organized learning environments showed that as the internet becomes more prevalent, groups of children can learn things by themselves. By things I mean they can learn almost anything by themselves. If we put all that together to what does the future of learning, what is the future of learning going to look like, I would say we have a couple of unanswered questions. First of all, what is the future of knowing going to look like? Is it as important to know things as they were before the electronic age? Is knowing an essential part of what we call education? I think that the central word is learning as opposed to either knowing or education. So I think in the future we will have to focus more on how to let learning happen, and also we need to keep in mind that learning cannot be imposed from the outside, it grows from the inside. If you take that and if you take the internet as the source from where information comes, then the combination of these two will perhaps give us what the future might look like.
Usted tiene una frase muy poderosa que considero que resume un poco su perspectiva. Y usted dice algo así como que no se trata de hacer que el aprendizaje suceda, sino de cómo dejar que el aprendizaje suceda. ¿Podría contarnos un poco más sobre esta idea?
So, firstly, our focus has to be learning, not knowing, not education, those derivative words. If we look at learning, then learning happens the way in which, for example, a tree grows. You can decide where you want the tree perhaps. You can decide what kind of tree you want, but you cannot decide how the tree will grow. The tree will grow by itself. So that distinction doesn't exist very clearly inside the education systems today, because the existing system is derived from the immediate past of industrialization. In industrialization, you don't let things happen. That's absolutely not it. You have to make things happen. We are in that transition, but it is unfortunate that a generation of learners are still sort of battling with a system which believes that you can make people learn things. I think our first and foremost priority is to understand this and to shift to what it should be.
Y usted también habla de que el aprendizaje solo puede suceder en los límites del caos. ¿Podría contarnos más sobre esta idea?
Well, it's a bit of a guess. Why guess? Because after looking at children self-organizing their learning, if I try to think of parallels, the first thing that comes to mind is chaos. Chaos not in the English sense of the word. Chaos in the sense of a disorderly system. But we know from physics that if you have an interconnected system, what's called a dynamical system, then left to itself, it can show emergent behavior. a perfectly ordered system remains exactly as it is. A perfectly disordered system will produce nothing at all. But if you bring the two together, then this rather romantic term, the edge of chaos, it seems as though in nature, almost anything that shows emergent properties always happens at the edge of chaos. So when I look at children, I see them sitting in orderly rows and columns. That's the industrial age educational model. It's static. On the other hand, if you look at street children who are, doing nothing at all by our norms, we say they're wasting time, they're running around here and there. Also, nothing much happens there. But if there was a way to bring those two systems together, which is what I'm trying to do in the school in the cloud, I'm hoping that the edge of chaos effect will produce effective learning.
¿Usted cree que se pueden organizar los sistemas autoorganizados?
Yes, it's a good question because it seems as though it is a contradiction in terms. Can you organize a self-organizing system? But actually, you can. Chaotic systems show emergent behavior only under certain circumstances. Those circumstances are often designed by nature in natural systems, but they are necessary for self-organization to happen. I'm trying to figure out how, within the established model of schools, one can generate self-organizing behavior. To give an example, a beehive is a self-organizing system. No individual bee knows how to build a beehive, but they know how to do it all together. One would think that you cannot control this, but we know from bee farming that you actually can. You can set the outer constraints. You cannot obviously meddle with the internal chaotic nature of what's happening inside, but you can produce the honey. Hopefully, if that makes any sense, that will give us the school of the future.
¿Usted cree que Internet va a cambiar las instituciones políticas tal cual las conocemos hoy día?
Well, that's a pretty long and complex question, but let's see what little we do know about it right now. We know that in the world we've experimented with a number of different political scenarios, political situations. The longest of the whole lot was monarchy, which is what was at the root of kingdoms and so on and so forth. We know that, everything is documented there. We know its strengths and we know its weaknesses. However, it did not last, which is possibly a clear demonstration of the fact that it wasn't the very best that there could be. What happened next was, after the monarchies and the empires had gone, is, according to me, a chaotic period where we experimented with a large number of different ways of governance, all of which is documented. Some succeeded, some failed, some were middling. Socialism, communism, democracy, capitalism, all of that. To me, they were all humanity's experiments with self-organization. The democratic system is possibly the closest to a chaotic, edge of chaos kind of system, because we assume that the opinion of many is more than likely to be the right way to go. That's, I suppose, the basis of the whole thing. If that is the case, then naturally it has to go towards a totally decentralized, emergent behavior-based political system. Is that possible? Well, I'm not an expert in political science, I wouldn't be able to say. But will the internet play a role in it? I think for sure. Will it be possible for people's collective desire to be available at milliseconds notice for action to be taken or for decisions to be made. It takes us very far into the future. I hope not too far, but into the future certainly. But in almost every sphere of life we see this happening. Whether it is trying to figure out how the traffic moves, whether it is trying to figure out the weather, we are beginning to understand how the edge of chaos works. And if that comes to governance, then just as we spoke about education, perhaps one day governance will also go according to the rules of order out of chaos.
¿Cómo imagina usted las sociedades del futuro? ¿Cómo imagina usted que serán las sociedades del mañana?
Well, once again, it has to be based on a lot of guesswork. But if we see that almost everything that we have done seems to be eventually headed towards connected dynamical systems producing emergent behavior, if that is the way of nature as far as we can tell, then I guess it's pretty safe to assume that society itself will also head towards that direction. What does that mean for ownership, knowledge, wisdom, the arts? It's not for one individual to try to guess what exactly will happen to each. But we can, I think, imagine a future where the whole of humanity acts as a collective dynamical system. It's almost as though 7 billion brains find a means to connect into a kind of consciousness that we at present cannot imagine. And just to make things a little scarier, the internet, it already is a couple of billion devices connected together in ways that no engineer can figure out. It's beyond that. Does it think? Well, I don't see why not, because the only other switching system which is connected in billions that we know of is inside our heads, and we know that that thinks. So what does that mean? Could that be what our future actually is meant to be? Not billions of individuals, but a single entity whose shape, size, dimensions are not imaginable at this point in time. When will it happen? Well, it sounds like out of science fiction, so it's so very far in the future. I wish it was like that. I don't think so. I think we've crossed the exponent. And when you cross the exponent, things happen faster than you can imagine. I think we're living through that, and which is why we have discussions like the one we are having, because we can see that some big change has got to happen to everything. We don't quite know where and how.
Muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros el día de hoy. Ha sido un placer estar con usted.